In the book of Exodus, Moses is a really central figure. He's kind of hard to miss. And for good reason, too. His story is one of unbelievable wild twists and turns with an impact on the whole people of God. Over the course of his life, Moses experiences an instantaneous rise to the top out of nothing and tumbles to the depths of oblivion and despair over time, finally starting a new chapter of becomings, where his faithful actions are every bit as risky and courageous and absolutely outrageous as everything that came before, but more grounded in truth this time. The truth of who Moses is, of who his people are, and who God is as well. There's so much that gets transformed in the literal and proverbial wilderness of Moses' life. And I'm just talking about the first time he travels beyond Egypt, before he frees the Hebrew people from slavery and spends over 40 years wandering with them in the wilderness as well. In that first half of Moses' life, we'll focus today. I'd highly encourage you to do some reading in Exodus and beyond on your own. For the full story, it is an epic and exciting one. Epic enough to have a Disney movie made about it, right? But for today, we focus on just Exodus chapters 2 through 4. So please read those on your own before discussion groups. Back to Moses. Born a Hebrew slave and secretly arranged to be found and raised in the Pharaoh's own palace in Egypt as a prince. We're unsure when Moses discovered his humble real beginnings. He was the son of Pharaoh. Why would he question that? And if he did, why pursue it? He only had things to lose. Power, riches, a royal family. Why would he do that? Maybe he never even wondered. Why would he? Maybe he always wondered. Maybe one day he finally found it strange how much he resembled his wet nurse, who just happened to be his mother. But whatever happened, we know at some point he discovered who he was, the complete opposite of what he'd been taught. Yesterday a prince of Egypt, today Egypt's slave. A firm ground that had given way beneath his feet at this. The way it does when what was certain becomes a lie, when everything we knew we could hang on becomes sand slipping between our fingers. Earth crumbles around him with that truth. Suddenly Moses' familiar world slants sideways and spins. Everything has changed, and perhaps even Moses becomes unrecognizable to himself. I mean, did he really just kill an Egyptian to save a slave? What's happening to him? Who is he becoming? Who is he? And with a foot in each world, royalty and slave, where could he possibly belong? What is true anymore? In utter confusion, amidst an identity crisis and guilt and shame, feeling no choice, he runs then into the wilderness, to Midian, exiled from those who knew him before, but also finally separated from the lies. Hopefully, with space to wrestle and reckon with who he is now, surrounded with unforgiving and unknown terrain, disoriented, devastated, exhausted, clueless, what is he supposed to do now? I mean, what would we do? Stripped from the layers of our built-up identities, family, friends gone, places he called home gone, the roles and personas and power that he held gone. When we take a step back and look at who we are without those things, our people, our places, our roles and our power, who are we? When the self-confidence and validity that we put in those things gets shaky and crumbles, what's left? Who are we then? What are we still about? What's still there? And when we look close, even just in hindsight, where might we still see God in those moments of crisis? I mean, not all of us get a burning bush when we enter seasons of exile in our lives. So when we have to question, where is God? Is God still there? Is that still true? I think it's one of my favorite things about the character of Moses, that while he certainly doesn't seek out these difficult situations that he finds himself in, he also sure doesn't fold, right? Moses has grit. He stays in it and wrestles and doesn't take the easy out. Even when he doubts his own abilities, he trembles at his task and bargains for backup, his buddy Aaron. He searches for honest answers and responds with actions that are true to himself, to God, to the needs of his people, and to his own needs too. He has no interest in sticking his head in the sand and pretending things aren't what they are, right? He's got a drive to wrestle with the truth, and right or wrong to face it and take it to the next logical, well, what then? While raised as an Egyptian, he learns slaves are his people. So knowing this truth, if Moses sees a slave being beaten to death, then what? He feels responsible to stop it. If he's stranded in exile, not able to return to Egypt in fear of his life, he surrenders to this truth, and then what? He accepts the hospitality offered to him, learns to live there, and makes a home in the wilderness. When he experiences God in inexplicable ways, a burning bush, and God tells Moses to go back to Egypt, where he absolutely cannot go, right? Then what? Well, if God is God, the I am that I am, our deepest truth, well, what then? I guess we're going back to Egypt. And if God commands Moses one more time, demand the freedom of my people from the Pharaoh you knew as brother, an impossible ask, right? Well, that's just what Moses is going to do. His conviction compels him. Because Moses doesn't settle for half-truths, and he also doesn't skimp on the follow-through. There is no turning away for him. He is relentlessly driven, in no small part because God has given him a core identity and a firm purpose. Moses' own truth compels him. God's truth compels him. His people's truth of suffering compels him to embrace who he is, to believe in new possibilities and real freedom, to act with courage and faith. What identities remade and claimed? What purpose found? What freedom from actual bondage might yet be calling out? Daring us to chase after God's truth for us all and follow through. May we be so compelled as our Legend of Exile, Moses.